Welcome, everyone, to the China Seminar Series hosted by the Australian Centre of China and the World and the Australian National University. I'm Matthew Galway, Senior Lecturer of Chinese History here at the ANU, and it is my privilege to be hosting us today for our speaker, Yiren, who will be delivering her talk today, The Maoist Message in the Chinese Countryside, 1949 to 1978. Before I introduce our speaker, we'll begin with an acknowledgement of country. Here at the ANU, and of course Australia-wide, we acknowledge and celebrate the First Nations. Here in Canberra, the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory, predominantly here the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri First Nations, on whose unceded traditional lands we meet, and we pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And a bit on our speaker today, Yiren is a postdoctoral fellow at the Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies at Harvard University, and a recent PhD graduate from the Department of History at the University of Pennsylvania. Go Quakers! She is a historian of modern Chinese history with research interests in social and cultural history. And she and I have actually collaborated for a panel at the Association of Asian Studies forthcoming up in Seattle, Washington in 2024. It is my honor and privilege to introduce my friend and colleague, Yiren.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And thank you everyone for joining us today. So today I will present a book manuscript I'm working on, which is revised from my doctoral dissertation. I will try to keep the presentation within 1 hour and try to leave more time for the Q&A session. So without further ado, let's start. The Maoist Message in the Chinese Countryside, 1949 to 1978. So we all know that the CCP's initial success in gaining its political power relied on its peasant-backed revolution. But when the CCP was transforming its governance from a rural-based authority into an urbanized modern state after 1949, most preferential policies were given to urban citizens at the expense of those in the countryside. Correspondingly, the party needed constant propaganda initiatives in rural China to cultivate a docile peasantry willing to make continuous sacrifices to construct a collective countryside and eventually realize a socialist state. According to the data on the website of the National Bureau of Statistics of the PRC, there were 541,670,000 people at the end of 1949. Among them, almost 490 million were rural citizens. In other words, more than 89% of Chinese were rural citizens in the first year of the PRC. So a legitimate question to ask here is how the newly established PRC reached out and delivered its propaganda to its rural populations, especially those scattered in remote villages. A short answer to this question is that an ever-expanding cohort of grassroots propagandists played a central role in the Chinese Communist Party's rural propaganda in the Mao era. And this raises further questions. Who were they? Why did they join the state propaganda? What exactly did they do? And most importantly, why do these questions matter? So these queries guide my dissertation's writing and research process, and I hope to share with you some of the interesting findings of the research in today's talk. So first of all, I loosely define grassroots propagandists as those who conveyed propaganda face-to-face to ordinary Chinese rural citizens. In a professional capacity, they were folk artists or local entertainers and cultural workers affiliated with non-official or official institutions, or even neighboring villages with a key interest in literature and art. Demographically, the group was diverse, spanning a wide range of gender identities, ages, and encompassing both individuals with and without disabilities. So they represented a wide cross-section of society's marginalized and disadvantaged, from ostracized opera actors and blind storytellers to starved peasants, disillusioned educated youth, and rural children who were deprived of a regular schooling. The creation of such a vast propaganda workforce didn't happen overnight. It expanded gradually over the years. the CCP's initial efforts to establish its propaganda teams at the grassroots level can be traced back to wartime. Efforts to establish propaganda teams persisted after the founding of the People's Republic. However, as I hinted at the very beginning, there was a significant shift in the CCP's rural propaganda policy after 1949. During the wartime, rural populations were generally more easily mobilized as potential beneficiaries of CCP's initiatives, such as anti-Japanese movement or land distribution. But post-1949, the rural populace, once prioritized, found their status overshadowed by their urban peers. And without a clear path toward the tangible rewards, it became more challenging to draw the rural populations into the party's propaganda project. Additionally, while the CCP was once a local authority confined to relatively smaller or border areas, its accession to national dominance in 1949 brought about a more daunting propaganda task. So in the initial years, local governments across the nation grappled with a common issue, that is a shortage of personnel to carry out grassroots propaganda. Therefore, a significant number of people were recruited into party-endorsed drama troupes, storyteller teams, and other grassroots institutions to conduct propaganda work. Notwithstanding the recruitment of folk artists, the state's need for grassroots propagandists could not be satisfied. Therefore, the People's Republic also sought to enlist ordinary peasants from local communities to undertake propaganda duties in their own villages, especially when agriculture collectivization rapidly developed in the second half of the 1950s. The integration of free amateurs in its propaganda ranks, on the one hand, demonstrated the party's constant efforts in building a populist propaganda team at the ground level. But on the other, it reflected a huge gap between the great demand for propagandists in the vast rural lands and the insufficient source the party could allocate to raise an expensive propaganda team, mainly staffed by comparatively highly paid local professionals. So with the growing conflicts between the greater domestic demand for agricultural products and the decreasing agricultural output during the Great Leap Forward, raising a propaganda team loaded with professionals became increasingly over the financial capability of the party. Many paid professionals in this cohort were dismissed from the party's propaganda ranks in 1962. The reduction of paid workers from its propaganda ranks showed the limits of the party state, but it did not result in a dwindling size of the party's massive body of grassroots propagandists. A large amount of educated youth joined the grassroots propaganda ranks after the national reduction movement and played a central role in the socialist education movement in the countryside. Even during the Cultural Revolution period, one of the most turbulent periods during the Mao era, the cohort of party's grassroots propagandists continued to expand, continue to grow, incorporating numerous school-aged children into their ranks. So this overview offers a concise history of the party's grassroots propagandists throughout the Mao era. And it also provides an outline of my book chapters, which are structured chronologically, as I showed in this slide. Even after presenting this overview, I suspect most of you might still have no clues regarding the questions I raised. So in order to answer those questions, I will narrow our discussion to one case study of blind storytellers today. But before I dive into the case study, I'd like to briefly discuss the methodology, sources, and the geographic focus of this project. Let's start with a very simple but profound statement. China is a vast country. I know some of you might be thinking, isn't it that obvious? Well, it's a widely acknowledged fact, but its significance to historians and scholars focused on China is so profound that I believe it merits re-emphasis here. Due to China's vast population, this is Australian over China, and you can compare the two countries' size and population. You know what I mean here. So due to China's vast population, territories, and diverse cultures and local ecologies, Historians of China are extremely careful about the any description of homogeneity or generalization in research on it. So partly given this concern, historians of the PRC have made great efforts in recovering the PRC history in its grassroots forms, which have illuminated the uneven implementation of state policy on the ground. My dissertation builds upon the historiographic trend of focusing on grassroots history in modern China. It is a grassroots history, geographically focusing on Southeast Shanxi. Let me make clear what I mean by writing a grassroots history. So in writing a grassroots history, I aim to focus on events as they unfolded on the ground and to give voice to those groups often underrepresented in the grand official narratives. But writing grassroots history is more than that. Quote historian Alexander F. Day's words here, the stakes of doing grassroots history were not just to replace the earlier top-down perspective with a bottom view, but calls for a study of everyday life as an already structured terrain. The material content of everyday life shaped the emergence of new social forms, policies, and political consciousness, and thus transformed the material reality in turn. Writing a grassroots history first means using it as a methodological starting point to understand the systematic and the dialectic relation between the state and the society in the history of the PRC. Secondly, conducting a grassroots history required relying on grassroots sources as foundational material. This research relies on grassroots sources, while this is county level archives. County level archives usually more disorganized than higher level ones, but they are usually more comprehensive than city, provincial, and central level archives. They hold valuable directives that will return at higher levels of government, providing the context within which local narratives can be understood. They also include localized narratives that have seldom been perused. So each archive collection on the ground level is indicative of multi-level government processes, which enable a connection between the grassroots history and the bigger national trends. I will provide an example when I discuss a case study later in today's talk. In addition, this dissertation also employs more than 100 volumes of internal documents, which are compiled, issued, and circulated among a specific small group of people, and also are sources of the older generations of participants in the Mao era, and also published or unpublished materials. This is a diary recorded by an opera actor in 1962. So all these grassroots sources shed light on voices of underrepresented groups in historical narratives, record everyday life of ordinary people, and show how non-elite individuals interact with more powerful social structures. I collected most of the sources during my 5 months of field research in Shanxi in 2019. In short, by employing grassroots sources, this project structures grassroots history as a methodological approach to the PRC history and further uncovers the diversity of grassroots experiences. So I'm conducting a grassroots history, but why Southeast Shanxi? As many of you probably have already guessed, Southeast Shanxi is a region I call home. This is a map of China, and this area with the yellow pin is the Shanxi. This you can see it. However, I'm neither a participant or a direct observer of local history I study. So this project began with my broad academic interest in history of Mao era China, instead of any emotional bond with this area or any attempt of self-awakening. So at the same time, however, my own connection to this area provides me with an advantageous perspective in observing its history. For example, my interpersonal connections made the archive research a much smoother process than it often is when done by outsiders. And personal connections also facilitated the process of finding local people who had the personal entanglements with the party grassroots propaganda during the Mao era. And moreover, as I understand their lives, their dialects, and their customs, my interviewees usually felt comfortable to talk with me, to allowed me better access to their personal stories. In short, my personal connection to this area and my simultaneous distance with my subject render me a perfect candidate to observe the local history in Southeast Shanxi. However, it is not the only, neither the most important reason for choosing this area as a geographic focus of this project. Instead, this locality was chosen due to its profound traditions in both communist revolution and folk culture. Let me zoom in this map. This is Shanxi, and this basin area surrounded by mountains is Southeast Shanxi. So located in southeast of Shanxi province, this region borders Hebei, Henan province to the east and the south. Spanning the borders between Shanxi, Hebei, Henan, the Taihang Mountains separate the mountainous Southeast Shanxi from the flood place in Hebei and Henan. And the Taiyue Mountains extended from north to south and roughly from the west and the southwest parameters of this region, separating it from basin areas in the middle and the southwest of Shanxi. This mountain region is geographically isolated from other areas, both in and outside of Shanxi province, by these two mountain range systems. The mountainous terrain on the lowest plateau make these areas easier to defend and much harder to attack in military contact. Therefore, many important military campaigns were operated in this region in the long Chinese history. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, the CCP established the Southeast Shanxi anti-Japanese base area in this region due to its strategic significance. Dominating this region, on the one hand, could render the vast plains in Hebei, Henan, Shandong, and Hubei vulnerable attack. On the other, it would keep metropolises such as Beijing, Tianjin, Zhengzhou, and Wuhan under check. Moreover, this region could also serve as a first natural defense for northwest China. So the takeover of this region could easily place Xi'an or Chongqing in great danger. Therefore, this area was one of the first areas that the Japanese intended to conquer after they established the Manchukuo, which facilitated the wartime cooperation between CCP and Kuomintang in Shanxi to resist the Japanese invasion and further help the establishment of the CCP South Shanxi anti-Japanese base area at the end of 1937. Building upon the South Shanxi base area, the Jingji border region was established in 1941 and it became the CCP's largest border region in North China. So the South Shanxi base area was a core district among all the constituent base areas of the Jingji border region. Administratively, it was a seat of the border region government. The North China Bureau of the Central Committee of the CCP also located in this area. Besides, the field headquarters of 8th Route Army under Peng Dehuai was also located in this area, and it served as a hub for several large-scale operations during the wartime. When the collaborative relationship between the two parties deteriorated after the end of the Second Sino-Japanese War, Southeast Shanxi became the first critical region that the Kuomintang attempted to take back from the CCP. The CCP's first victory in China actually happened in Southeast Shanxi. It's a Southeast Shanxi campaign, Shangdang Zhanyi, in 1945. It was an important military conflict for the CCP, which boosted CCP's morale and won the CCP more international support. After the establishment of the People's Republic, Southeast Shanxi continued to pioneer the party's grand project of collectivization. This is an administrative map of this area. You can see it almost overlaps with this two mountain range system. And this is Jincheng. It became an independent prefectural level city in 1985. But before that, there is only one city, Changzhou, located here. Culturally, Southeast Shanxi embraces rich traditions in folk arts and cultures. More than 570 drama troupes, professional drama troupes, with 6,000 different repertoires of local operas. They serve to entertain the local people between the Ming Dynasty to the establishment of the PRC. Though only 1/8 of all Asian theatrical stages survived the destruction of military and political chaos in the 20th century, still more than 1,000 theatrical stage survive in modern days Southeast Shanxi as evidence of a robust and sustained local demand for opera shows or stage performances in this region. Meanwhile, many other traditional entertainment performances, such as locally popular storytelling arts, could be easily conducted in any communal or familial space in villages. The map here shows the major popular storytelling arts or 曲艺 arts in Shanxi. And you can see the genres in Southeast Shanxi is much richer than in other areas, and the diversified genres and sub-genres of folk arts mainly form the popular entertainment of local people. Going beyond providing the pure values of enjoyment, activities of popular entertainment are closely related to local society, local social and religious life. So popular entertainment was not simply a reflection of the local society. It is a significant element to determine the character of the rural society. Due to the significance of the folk arts and cultures, the Chinese Communist Party began the use of all kinds of popular entertainment activities for its rural propaganda when the party attempted to take root in this area in late 1930s. So during the whole Mao era, the CCP continuously conducted its rural propaganda, mainly by organizing popular entertainment in rural areas. At that time, although modern media techniques developed quickly in the People's Republic, many rural areas, including Southeast Shanxi, lacked modern technological means or networks, especially before the 1960s. Meanwhile, the low literacy and educational level in rural China during this period restricted the capabilities of literate activities as efficient propaganda. Therefore, the propaganda in the countryside usually resorted to comparatively low-tech, more traditional and more popular genres and means. The utilization of local popular entertainment was a flagship feature of the CCP's propaganda in the countryside. In a nutshell, Southeast Shanxi is a geographically, politically, and culturally integrated unit, which played a major role in shaping the revolutionary discourses of the CCP as early as the 1930s. Though several significant studies geographically focuses on Southeast Shanxi, including Hinton's well-known class expansion, its significance has long been overshadowed by the prominence of the Shanganling border region in the revolution narrative of the CCP. For example, the CCP practiced many wartime propaganda strategies much earlier in Southeast Shanxi than in Shanganling. Many of these wartime propaganda strategies continue to be employed after the establishment of the People's Republic. Therefore, Southeast Shanxi serves as a perfect geographic focus in observing the continuation, diversification, and the transformation of the CCP's revolutionary legacies in its vast rural territories. And this is the main reason I chose this area as a geographic focus of this research. Now, you know, I'm conducting a grassroots history and geographically focused on Southeast Shanxi, and I will be happy to answer questions on my methodology, sources, and field research in the Q&A session. But for now, let's turn to the case study, a case study on blind storytellers. The art of the storytelling was mostly performed by the blind in Southeast Shanxi or in the whole North China. It provided an important alternative entertainment form for rural dwellers. Villagers that could not afford an opera troupe could invite blind storytellers to tell stories during the temple fair. An ordinary rural household could also afford a storytelling performance for occasions such as a birthday, livestock breeding, or a funeral, or just for entertainment. With much more modest equipment, instrument, and staff, blind storytellers could travel far and wide to reach to those living in isolated mountain areas. As scholars have recognized, storytellers were important shapers of values in places where oral communication played an important role in daily life. The work of blind storytellers in South Shanxi had piqued the interest of the CCP as early as 1938. They were believed well suited to become propagandists because of their versatility, that they could easily incorporate the party's policies or ideologies into their easy to understand lyrics in a timely manner, and also due to their high mobility. So during the wartime, when the other grassroots propagandists, such as touring opera troupes with extensive staff and crew, faced difficulties in getting through the Japanese blockade and traveling to villages in Taihang Mountains, bodily impairment provided blind storytellers an inbuilt advantage in acquiring compassion from others as harmless and useless individuals. So they could deliver the propaganda message to rural dwellers using their disabled but mobile bodies. The first CCP-sponsored propaganda team of blind people in this area was organized in Wuxiang County in 1938, which first incorporated 13 blind storytellers and soon expanded to a large group with 83 blind storytellers. The photo in this PowerPoint is Wuxiang team performing for commanders and soldiers at the headquarters of the 8th Route Army. Parallel teams were soon organized in almost all counties in South Shanxi and also other areas in and outside Shanxi in the 1940s. Instead of being a short-lived wartime practice, the incorporation of blind storytellers continued in the new republic. When the new state was established in 1949, the CCP already recruited a great number of blind storytellers in the Chu-Yi propaganda team of blind people, also simplified as blind propaganda team, 盲宣队 by locals. Before the arrival of the CCP, blind storytellers only told traditional or old stories, 传统书旧书, mostly on the themes of the rise and fall of dynasties, or military adventure and epic journeys, or romances between gifted scholars and beautiful ladies. Traditional stories were extremely long and usually not recorded with any physical documents, and storytelling masters orally imparted long traditional stories to their apprentices, who then practices hours of memorization. As soon as the party began to incorporate blind storytellers in its propaganda teams, they were required to perform modern revolutionary stories for propaganda purposes. Usually, a propaganda team of blind storytellers would hire a literate person with a normal or partial vision in the propaganda team. In addition to being the guide of blind storytellers during their performing tours, this person was responsible for reading contemporary official documents, press outlets, and popular magazines to blind storytellers in the team. Then the versatile members could incorporate the party's policies into their lyrics and further promote in front of the local audience. And they could also adapt the stories in magazines into their own familiar tools. In the photo, in the slide is showing the handwritten scripts and collections of Mao-era popular magazines in the exhibition room in the Lingchuan propaganda team of blind people. Simultaneously, the CCP consistently worked to convert the traditional storyteller into qualified party propagandists. One significant initiative was the prohibition of blind storytellers from fortune-telling, an activity that had traditionally provided them with a source of income. The two archive documents in the PowerPoint record how the CCP transformed the traditional blind storytellers into qualified propaganda agents in different times. So according to the different implementation and efforts of party-led transformation, blind storytellers in this area could be roughly classified into three categories in the Mao era. Firstly, as the earliest propaganda teams of blind people established by the CCP in this area, the Wuxiang and the Xiangyuan team were considered a successful model in transforming both the traditional storytelling art and its practitioners, and so obtained preferential treatment from the new state. In 1953, the central government issued a policy on planned purchase and the supply of grain to alleviate material shortages in urban areas and address national food scarcity. that is 统购统销. Consequently, urban residents and only a few commune members in rural areas became eligible for the non-agricultural provisions of grain, while rural residents were forced to surrender their grain to the state and faced restricted access to commodity grain. In such a continuation, all members of Wuxiang and Xiangyuan polite teams who originally came from and still lived and worked in the countryside were entitled to the non-agricultural provision of grain. With a non-agricultural provision, a blind storyteller in propaganda team could receive ration coupons for 16.5 kilograms 1 month. They lived a stable life with the support of the state. The entitlement of the non-agricultural provision of grain to storytellers also represented a significant departure from their previous position at the lowest rungs of the social ladder. They were now incorporated into a class under communist auspices that conferred certain advantages. Second, although the CCP also organized propaganda teams by incorporating and reallocating blind storytellers in the other countries, the party was never capable of fully managing them. While the Wuxiang and Xiangyuan teams became state-sponsored institutions in 1953, and all their members were fully titled to the non-agricultural provision of grain, these second category propaganda teams, such as Lingchuan, Qingshui, and Gaoping, did not. Only members with highly mastered storytelling skills were entitled to the non-agricultural provision of grain. Last, not all blind storytellers were recruited into the CCP propaganda teams. Some blind storytellers failed to be recruited due to their average storytelling skills, but those with impressive skills might also prefer not to accept the supervision from the CCP. So even without the support from the state, their popularity and among the local dwellers could easily earn them a decent income. Moreover, the identities of the party's grassroots propaganda agent and self-managed storytellers was constantly interchangeable. The rate of staff turnover in propaganda teams, particularly in the second category teams, was high. When the state control over entertainment performance became strict, more blind storytellers would leave the propaganda teams to become self-managed storyteller again. Blind storytellers usually toured in a group equipped with 6 to 10 people. So they marched in a straight line on the rough and narrow roads showed in this picture, and each member in the line held onto the preceding one's shoulder with one hand and held a cane in the other one to navigate the surroundings. The first person at the front of the line was the one with the best eyesight in the group. If they were lucky, they could find a sighted person to be their guide. However, the chance to have a sighted person in the touring group was rare. At best, the first guiding person would have blurred vision or partial vision. Except the summer harvest, fall harvest, and winter holiday seasons every year, they were always touring for performance from village to village. So every year, more than 9 months were spent on performance tours, and most of time was literally spent on the rugged path. It should be noted that marching in South Shanxi countryside was not easy, even for sighted person. Here is an interview I did in 2019. Hao Anfeng was a 12-year-old girl with normal vision in 1968 when she became the guide of Lingchuan propaganda team of blind people. She recounted me to her initial reluctance to act as a guide for the blind storytellers. I wanted to quit only after working for a couple of days in the very beginning. I didn't want to work for them because the job tortured me. One held the shoulder of the other with their bedrolls and belongings on their backs. Once we began a performance tour, we needed to walk for 2 months, walk for 50 to 60 days. You should at least take 2 pairs of shoes. We were climbing mountains and walking uphill all the time. At that time, there was no asphalt road. Mountains in Lingchuan are really high. Valleys are deep. There were only narrow winding trails. I was leading blind storytellers. We were usually in the middle of nowhere. I was suffering. I didn't want to work for the team. So once they arrived at a village, blind storytellers would find a local cadre to arrange their storytelling performance, accommodations, and meals in the village. Hopefully, they would welcome their arrival and be willing to raise millet to pay for their performance. If everything went well, they would bring a 3-hour storytelling performance to local villagers that night and stay overnight in the village and leave in the next morning to next village. However, it was not guaranteed that they would get a warm reception all the time. Sometimes they would be rejected because local cadres were too busy with other official business to arrange their performance. Bad weather also meant that few villagers were willing to leave their homes for the performance. Sometimes local dwellers were just unwilling to pay. In such undesirable situations, they would soon orient themselves toward the next village. This is the Xiangyuan team performing for local audiences in a courtyard in the Mao era. You can see they were surrounded by local audiences. But it should be noted that even with the party's repeated transformations, the reallocation of this person, the efficiency of their propaganda performance hardly pleased the party. First, the qualities of blind storytellers, such as popularity and versatility, were never fully mobilized by the party for its grassroots propaganda. Few blind storytellers applied their talents to enhance the party propaganda consciously. Compared to the didactic propaganda stories, traditional repertoires were always more welcomed by local audiences. Second, there was a constant contest between the blind storytellers in propaganda teams and their peers outside of the party's supervision. In order to earn a higher income, repertoires of self-managed storytellers were designed to cater to a local desire for traditional stories, which embraced plenty of feudalistic, erotic, or other party-banned elements. At the same time, though officially forbidden, they never stopped providing fortune-telling services to rural civilians. To avoid such competition, the CCP even issued an official performing permit to each blind storyteller in propaganda teams, ensuring that only storytellers with permits were officially allowed to perform. However, many self-managed blind storytellers simply made the counterfeit performing permits or just moved around to conduct business. And third, there was a constant contest between blind storytellers and other professional entertainers, especially opera actors. According to blind storytellers who once served the party's propaganda teams in the Mao era, as local opera troupes resumed regular performances after the war had ended, villages in better financial condition were willing to pay more money to watch opera performances with extensive actors, costumes, musical instruments, lighting, and other stage sets instead of storytelling performance with comparatively simple equipment. I shot this photo when I interviewed a living blind storyteller, Yang Aiguo, in the summer of 2019 in Zhangzi. He was telling stories while you can see he is playing an erhu, a drama, and also a wooden fish at the same time as wooden fish is here. Though the photo displays the mastered skill of blind storytellers, it also shows a typical blind storytelling performance with modest stuff and instrumental accompaniment. Even though the low efficiency of their propaganda performance, the cohort of blind storytellers did not lose its attraction to the party propaganda thereof. On the contrary, the CCP constantly found the propaganda potential in their disabled but mobile bodies of blind storytellers. Blind storytellers in the party's propaganda teams were always lauded for overcoming their impairment while on the move. This is a county document. The Wuxiang propaganda team of blind people was applauded that it carried out the party propaganda not only to every corner of countryside in Wuxiang County, but also to areas outside Wuxiang by overcoming all difficulties that their disabled body faced in 1950. In today's Lingchuan propaganda team of blind people, large posters of team's history are put up on the wall of its courtyard, and one of them centers on the history during the Mao era. And you can see the two photos set in the center of this Mao era poster are not their performance shots. Instead, they both capture the blind storytellers working with the difficulty on the mountains road in the Taihang Mountains. And in the biographical collection of blind storytellers, episodes describing their heroic efforts to make these arduous propaganda journeys underscore their self-sacrifices contributions to the party's local propaganda. While the storytelling performance of blind storytellers played a limited role in spreading the party's propaganda messages, their impaired but mobile bodies came to embody of the socialist values by conquering the challenging landscapes of rural China. However, the cooperation between the blind storytellers and the state did not last forever. The application of the planned purchase and the supply of grain did not solve the food shortage problem. On the contrary, as many scholars have studied, it was partially responsible for the following Great Famine between 1959 and 1961, which resulted in a staggering death toll in China. To avoid exploitation and continued food shortages in the countryside, more peasants chose to migrate to cities to make a living. Therefore, the party state implemented the hukou household supply with the rural or urban household registration. The party expected that such initiatives would root more rural residents in their countryside homes. Yet, rural citizens continue to pour into the city areas and found positions in the danwei systems by all means. In Shanxi alone, the rural labor force decreased from 5,770,000 in 1953 to 4,630,000 in 1960. That means more than 1 million Shanxi people migrated from rural areas to urban areas from 1953 to 1960. So in dealing with the outflow of the rural labor force and the increasing number of the personnel who were entitled to the non-agricultural provision, the central government determined to reduce the quota working in the danwei system. June 1961 report, as showed in the PowerPoint, it is reported by Xin Zhongxun with instructions from Mao Zedong. It was delivered to the counties in South Shanxi in July 1961, in which Mao ordered the cancellation of a non-agricultural provision for at least 20 billion staff. Specifically, the main objects of this reduction were staff who came from rural areas and had joined the objects of this, who joined the danwei after 1958. And these people were directed to return to their hometowns and reside into their local agricultural production. Almost at the same time as the second document show, the provincial document implementation plan for reducing organization staff in Shanxi province was also sent to county authorities in South Shanxi. In contrast to the central document, the provincial document did not refer to 1958 as a cutoff date. It proposed an initial phase of reduction of 300,000 among 3 million non-agricultural citizens in Shanxi by the end of the July 1961. And the second phase of the reduction followed in September in the same year with a reduction quota of 220,000 more people. And the third document is a prefectural government in South Shanxi issued. It showed the local government actively responded to the call from the higher authorities. Similar to the provincial document, the prefectural document did not clarify who should be reduced, but gave concrete numbers to each county as well as each institution. Even though the prefectural document mentioned 1958 as a cutoff year, people who had joined the workforce before 1958 were still dismissed. As a result of these drastic cuts, many of the party's grassroots propagandists who were previously entitled to the non-agricultural provision of grain lost their provisions in 1962. Almost all blind storytellers in propaganda teams, regardless of whether they had joined the propaganda teams before or after 1958, lost their non-agricultural provision in 1962. Archival documents cannot provide us with accurate information about who first came up with the idea to reduce a team of blind people, nor the exact reason why they were reduced. But as I stated earlier, the limited efficiency of their propaganda performance and the decreasing appeal of blind storytelling performance to local audience were both realities. So when the party state could provide sufficient food and the material benefits to its citizens, it could still afford to keep disabled workers in the danwei system due to the propaganda potential of their bodily handicap. However, when the party state became unable to provide sufficient food even for its able-bodied citizens and faced grave political and economic crises in the widespread famine, it no longer had food or other resources to spare for its disabled propagandists anymore. After the reduction, most propaganda teams of blind people became self-financing enterprises without any state support. Propaganda teams were unable to maintain their size and streamline their personnel. Therefore, blind storytellers of old age or those considered unskilled were driven away immediately, joining the ranks of self-managed blind storytellers. Meanwhile, more competent blind storytellers automatically left the propaganda teams to be self-managed once again. The community of self-managed blind storytellers soon expanded and grew active across expansive rural areas. They secretly performed the traditional stories and offered fortune-telling to villagers in the Taihang Mountains. The Cultural Revolution disrupted the everyday life of residents throughout the nation, including blind storytellers in South Shenxi. Almost all blind storytellers teams suspended their performance tours between the end of 1966 and the first several months of 1967. They were required to stay home to participate in the struggle session and learn Maoist quotations. According to one of my interviewees, he's a member of the Xiangyuan propaganda team of blind storytellers. He said, when the Cultural Revolution began, we stayed in the county seat every day for struggle session. After several months, we realized that it was not okay for us to attend struggle sessions all the time. We needed to make money to buy food. So from the second half of 1967, despite the local authorities' attempts to discourage touring performances, blind storytellers in the Xiangyuan propaganda team desperately resumed their regular tours to make a living. In addition to finding their niche in the economy, blind storytellers in Xiangyuan propaganda team sought help from local authority, appealing to take back their non-agricultural provision they lost during the 1962 reduction. Local authorities failed to resolve the case of blind storytellers. Most local authorities at that time suffered from their own turmoil and violence, and it was possible that they were both unable and unwilling to help or support these disabled people. However, the blind storytellers were not willing to go unheard. They embarked on a different journey to appeal to Beijing in 1967. As one of the petitioners, Wang Junchuan reminiscent of experience in Beijing. We took a train and arrived in Beijing on snowy day around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We rode a bus to the Ministry of Culture. After listening to our petition, they told us, we cannot solve your problem because previous cadres who made the decision on reduction have all been overthrown. We are new cadres who have only recently come to power. Our working emphasis is on running struggle sessions against previous cadres. Your problem will be better solved by directly appealing to State Council. I was surprised by this suggestion, so I asked if the State Council was too powerful to bother with our problem. I thought that our local issue was too specific to the State Council. They said, you don't need to go into the State Council. The State Council set up a separate reception station dealing with petitioning cases from the start of the Cultural Revolution. It is in a yard on the east side of Tiananmen. So Wang and his peers ultimately go to the reception center, and the cadres there told them the local issue should be resolved by local authorities, and they give them a letter. You take the letter back to the provincial government. Instead of going back to the county level directly, the county government will not resolve it. So go to the provincial level first. The provincial cadre will provide you a solution. And then you can go back to the county with a provincial instructions. Finally, this latter not help them resume their non-agricultural provision in the end, but successfully get them a cash compensation of 0.40 yuan per capita per day for 4 months. By 1966 to 1978, the price of commodities was relatively stable in South Shanxi, given strict state control. And the average purchasing price of grain by the state was around 0.25 yuan per kilograms. So the compensation could buy each blind storyteller almost 200 kilograms of grain in total. These oral narratives, along with experiences of party-endorsed blind storytellers during the Mao era, provides an ideal context to address the questions I posed initially. First, who were they? So like the blind storytellers, grassroots propagandists are a wide cross-section of society's marginalized and disadvantaged. They were not official members of CCP's bureaucratic propaganda apparatus. They were at the margins of the CCP's gigantic propaganda system. Their financial relations with the state were ambiguous. While many cultural workers in collectively owned institutions gained financial support from the state, they were responsible for their profits and losses. And when the state faced times of financial difficulty, they might lose state financial support or be completely excluded from the state welfare. Though their financial connection to the party and state were precarious, or grassroots propagandists were under the supervision of CCP as essential mediators of party's grassroots propaganda. Grassroots propagandists were concurrently part of the rural masses. Their closeness to rural audiences made them more potent instruments of the propaganda than party cadres. At the same time, however, they were targets of such a spiritual transformation, as they were also constituents of what the CCP considered to be unrevolutionary, indolent, or ideologically backward rural masses. They were expected to find better versions of themselves in the propaganda culture texts that they wrote, on the theatrical stage where they performed repertoires, or in everyday experience of propaganda tours. So the ambiguous and complex roles of grassroots propagandists make it difficult to define them strictly, but it was precisely such ambiguity, their closeness and connectedness with both the rural masses and official organs, their in-betweenness between the two, made them an active influence and a crucial grassroots power of party propaganda. And second, why did they join the party's propaganda team? The intellectual process of culturally interpreting storytelling art always appealed to contemporary party upper echelons, elite artists, and intellectuals, and it became a prominent subject within the burgeoning field of cultural studies focused on propaganda during the Mao era. However, in practice, many grassroots propagandists rarely bought into the didactic information underlying propaganda. The majority of blind storytellers, among others, were drawn to party's propaganda work primarily because of the tangible material benefits it promised. With the establishment of the People's Republic, the CCP rapidly accumulated more economic, political, and social capital due to its increasing state power. As a result, the state became a very attractive collaborator in bringing quality propagandists on board. In addition to propaganda teams of blind storytellers, many other party-endorsed cultural institutions also received quotas of non-agricultural provision. For example, in 1956, almost all grassroots party-endorsed drama troupes in South Shanxi had transitioned into state-owned work units, and opera actors in these institutions received monthly non-agricultural provisions of grain. However, the tangible incentives also implied that if the relationship between the state and these agents became tenuous, these grassroots agents might easily seek ways to skirt around the party policies. And third, what did they do? So standing at the nexus of official authorities and the vast rural populace, these people played a key role in propaganda delivery, propaganda production, and propaganda reception. First, in place of modern technological infrastructure shortage, human agents played a central role in transmitting the propaganda messages to citizens scattered through the countryside. Blind storytellers and other grassroots cohorts who are covered or not covered in this research were all essential human mediums that allowed propaganda messages to travel far and wide in vast rural land during the Mao era. Second, they were far from the instruments of propaganda that passively conveyed top-down propaganda messages to rural citizens. Rather, they actively participated in propaganda production. In the case of blind storytellers, they were encouraged to produce engaging propaganda lyrics for local audiences. I particularly discuss the production of propaganda materials through the chapter 4 on rural educated youth, which I've already published one journal article on this topic. If you have interest in this topic, feel free to drop me an email. I will share this article with you. And moreover, the influence of the grassroots propagandists in the realm of propaganda production extended well beyond the mere portrayal of fictional characters in their stories, literary works, or stage dramas. Rather, they produced propaganda through their very existence and their daily lives, a phenomenon I refer to as flash propaganda. As demonstrated by the blind storytellers, the mere acts of traveling, performing, or farming became profound manifestations of propaganda. Their daily experiences inherently embodied the community's values they were entrusted to spread among rural populations. The CCP believed that such tangible, lived propaganda, as opposed to rehearsed performances, provided rural audiences with authentic characters, genuine day-to-day experiences, and sincere emotions. Therefore, the human embodiment of these grassroots propagandas enable rural audiences to navigate the dichotomies of fiction and reality, of political and political narratives, as well as ordinary and abstract. Residing at the core of the propaganda production, grassroots propagandists, though their very presence, seamlessly integrated into the daily lives of rural masses. Last, as parts of the rural masses, as I just discussed, they were also targets of grassroots propaganda. Folk artists were expected to rid themselves of all feudal, backward, and toxic remnants, both in their performing repertoires and their minds. Disabled agents were also expected to be useful by overcoming their disability. Instead of merely performing themselves in order to transform others, they were expected to be transformed by their own propaganda. They were both the means and ends of parties' grassroots propaganda in the countryside. And the last, why does this matter to us? Go back to the flash propaganda, which I have just mentioned. It is to refer to the propaganda of ideological values and principles, not merely through traditional channels of communications, such as media or script performance, but primarily through the lived experiences, actions, and the daily routines of individuals. So in this form of propaganda, the human body and its activities become both the medium and message. The term captures the idea that seeing individuals, especially those with unique challenges like the blind storytellers, embodying certain values in their day-to-day lives can be a more powerful and persuasive form of propaganda than rehearsed or scripted messages. The authenticity and the genuineness inherent in this flash propaganda resonate on a deeply personal level, making the conveyed values more tangible and relatable to the masses. Flash propaganda plays a significant role in CCP's propaganda strategies, and you can easily capture it in today's China. For example, I believe everyone watched the 感动中国, which can be translated as Moving China or Touching China. It's a Chinese annual television program that has been broadcast since 2002. And the show is produced by the CCTV and typically airs at the end of each year. It highlights and honors those individuals or groups who have made significant contributions to the society or achieved remarkable accomplishments or displayed notable heroism. So the aim of the program is not only to recognize the accomplishments of these people, but also to promote values and narratives that align with or support the agendas and the priorities of the Chinese government. And secondly, given their humble social standing, these people, the grassroots propagandists, they played an oversized role in spreading the party propaganda. In the process, the state did not always achieve the ideal goal of grassroots propaganda. Rather, as this case study has shown, it was met with local resistance and unexpected results. And the rural masses gravitated toward propaganda work for its promise of concrete material benefits. But the existence of these vast grassroots propagandists is usually used to testify as hard evidence of the intimate partnership between the party and its people. The monetary and the social benefits the party provided to this group proved the party's benevolence and generosity. However, those resistance or conflict voices were usually muted by powerful propaganda narratives in and beyond Mao's China. And the memory of Mao's era was much messier, complicated, and varied. And this project intends to capture this daily that of the Mao era. And the third is we're often far removed from what happened at the grassroots level. Top authorities could release overarching directives, but the local cadres at the county and village levels were left at their own devices to figure out how to implement these general directives within their own specific circumstances. The oral narratives of the Wang Junchuan, for example, highlights the complex interplay between different levels of state authorities. Local cadres did not always follow the steps of central authorities. Moreover, they felt pressure to local practices or readjust the top directives to specific environments. So if there is a considerable distance between the top level decisions and their practical implementation at the grassroots level, how did the state reach out to its grassroots society? The question I initially brought up. Findings from this case study of blind storytellers, and indeed many case studies in this project, suggest an interesting inversion. It wasn't always the state reaching out to the society. Rather, often society reached out to the state. These grassroots communities were far from passive. They actively sought to make their voices heard. The overbearing nature of CCP in the decades was indeed a real force, and no one could escape the party's grave. But it would be a mistake to view these grassroots individuals solely as passive victims of party machinations. This case study and the broader project demonstrate the grassroots people could be victims and wield agency at the same time. They connected themselves to and put pressures on the state authorities at all times. Therefore, the agency exhibited by grassroots community throughout this project offers a lens through which we can understand the enduring resilience and adaptability of Chinese society. And this intrinsic dynamism, transcending specific eras, has been instrumental in China maintaining its relevance and significance on the global stage from ancient times to present day. Thank you.